the traditional media houses. Is that fair? Is that true? You talked about trust. I used to read the Encyclopedia Britannica for authentic information when I was a kid. Wikipedia, there was a trust deficit in the first 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, but somewhere along the line, a lot of us decided to trust Wikipedia. Second is, we talked about advertising revenues. There was a mention of advertising revenues in the US, $36 billion, versus at another point, $20 billion to the traditional print media. And India figure of $418 million. Now, the question I want to ask you is, when we talk about digital advertising revenue, what does that really mean? I mean, Facebook is digital, certainly, but not media, the way we understand in the traditional sense. So, I mean, how much of that $36 billion is actually going to media? And one very small point, if you may allow me, like in terms of tipping points, sometimes we talk about page views and things like that. There was a mention of 1 million page views. Somebody who reads a magazine from cover to cover, 100 pages, would mean 10,000 readers going. So, I mean, how far are we from the tipping point? I mean, is that significant enough? Is that 1 million page views? Is it a relevant number, or do we have an alternate way of measuring what the tipping point would be? Thank you.
Jehill, can I take that?
Yeah, please.
Good points. First of all, in the digital age, numbers in terms of millions, billions, those numbers will now be in terabytes, gigabytes. I mean, those are going to be those numbers. So one needn't particularly be scared and shouldn't compare them with the brick and mortar models of anything else. So those numbers really are non-comparable. And people have come to the ability to be able to understand and handle those numbers and pretty well also handle the brick and mortar numbers. So I don't think that comparison really holds. The second part about whether traditional media would be the ones through which people would be sifting through the world, yes, I think it does. Look at Twitter. The number of references there on any day, any morning, of news items culled from traditional media is phenomenal. Now what happens is that essentially it's a question of building up trust. India or any other country or any other place, people, when they're discerning, when they're picking up information, people know where to pick up information from. It's just like going to the market. You know exactly pretty well where exactly you would get a good deal. You don't just pick up, I mean, there are reasons why you pick up something from the vendor on the street or why you pick up something from the shop with the brand. It's the same principle which applies. And that's why I had talked about maintaining that brand in terms of, which Annurag also said, about maintaining the quality of the content, in terms of really being fair about what you are selling. If you are selling absolute bullshit, then obviously there's going to be a trouble there. And that's where people...
I thought you'd do better.
So that's where the trouble comes along. We tried.
You did try.
Okay. My question goes to the team here. Vinay made a mention that if you see the traditional newspaper model, about 10% of the money comes in through subscription and 90% is ad revenue. If you look at the digital world, and all of us are talking about this evolution, the fact that if 4G happens, tablets come, before all of that happens, if you look at the current scenario, how is it being monetized today? So for all of you, HT has its portal, so does Business Today, so does Annurag's Exchange for Media, right? How many people, because you've got content for free, are coming down, seeing your content, and then you have ads which kind of enable you to monetize it. So what's the current situation? So all along in the last half an hour, we've heard that there would be this big change, but where are we right now? So how much money is being made in the digital format for all these products of yours?
The money being made, very small. You take 100% of my revenue, digital revenues are just about 2%. And just about enough to take care of the costs. But, the whole thing turns around when actually you find a big shift taking place to digital. Your revenues start going down. That's when activity in the digital space will really catch up. Today, revenues are going up. You've got a good growth happening. If the GDP grows between 5 and 6%, etc., your revenues will grow anywhere between 8 to 12%. With costs already having been, structural costs already being in place, your profitability will only grow. The crunch will really come when your profitability starts going down. That's when the readership starts going down. That's your currency for advertising. But till that happens, digital will really not take off.
See,
Everybody in the Western world started scrambling when the revenue started going down in the newspaper industry, no?
See, the other
Till
thing,
that time, nothing was happening. Sorry, Jay.
No, I just want to mention that the other thing in India is that we are still minuscule as far as internet penetration goes today. We are essentially a wireless country. So until wireless internet penetration takes off, we won't really know how that consumer behavior is going to change as far as access to digital news and digital content is going to come. So I think first there is a macro factor to consider, which is really access to broadband and to internet. Once that passes, then you'll start to see consumer behavior changing. And I think, now with some of these plans of the telecom companies over the next 2-3 years, we'll start to see hopefully some of that. And like when I mentioned, if it's at an affordable price, I think then that's a game changer.
I want to say one more thing. I know advertising is less, but I want to say, in my view, in my 13 years of being an entrepreneur and creating exchange for media and whatever, editorial people have still shaped up better in terms of what they are doing for the digital era. I think the sales people, and I have lots of friends who are CEOs and who are responsible for revenue, I think they're still, the way they sell any product, they're not digitally inclined. Because if you start asking them ROI, they're very uncomfortable, right? I would say people who come from television are still geared up because there is a Wednesday rating, it comes out. And so I think the sales people, the business people, orientation of selling a print product or selling the website of a news, and so if you're selling the website of a newspaper, in the whole portfolio, that's the toughest thing to sell.
No, but that will happen when the demand comes, no? So once the client starts demanding, which he has started demanding now,
Right.
You have to come up with a digital offering, and the sales people have to change their sales pitch. That's always the market demand, which changes the sales pitch.
Fair enough, Vinay. What I'm saying, I meet enough people where I find them, they're very good sales consultants, but they're not good sales people. They'll tell you how sales can happen. If you ask them to do sales, so anyway, that's what I feel. One of the reasons most newspaper companies, digital revenues are less than 1%. I mean, Vinay's company is lucky they are 2%. That's a lot, for the base they have.
Yeah, because I
Just to put some of this also in some context, if you look at demographic figures, it's quite clear that the population in India, that's every month at least 1 million kids are crossing the age of 18 every month. And that's those are the digital natives technically who are going to be looking at news more and more and we talk about penetration and so on. But the fact is that as costs for bandwidth keep going down and as offerings of handhelds and so on keep going down, attention spans are anyway very low. And to answer a question one of you asked, how long do people spend on reading a magazine or a newspaper? I was told a couple of years ago that you're lucky if someone spends an hour looking at a magazine. Very, very lucky. Sorry? I don't know what the attention span for an average newspaper reader is, but you might actually have more luck on the web. I think what's not happening enough is more monetization in terms of putting higher value news behind paywalls and so on. And we've got some way to go to putting in paywalls and making that start to work.
My only point was, if you see the digital spend, ad spend, it's been about 2,000 crores, this report says. And if you see over the last 4 years, we've been saying this pie is going to really grow, right? So every year you come at a conference saying that this would grow, the tipping point is achieved. That's the theme even today. But even if you see last year and numbers versus the last 12 months, the overall spend on the digital medium is, it's not growing.
And most of that is Google.
I mean, if
And
you
most of that is Google.
if you remove the top 3 guys, which Google being the largest, where is, we've got HT, we've got, Business Today, Express. I mean, if you see all these big houses which are making tons of money in their traditional print format, but there's
Yeah, but that's exactly the point of the discussion, right? Is that digital spend may not accrue to the traditional brands. It is so digital advertising grew 41% last year
Small base.
of a very small base. Agreed, but it still grew in a significantly large number. At least at KPMG, we are projecting that it will continue to grow north of 35% for the next decade. And that's exactly the threat, is that advertising is a large part of digital advertising actually goes to Google, it's search advertising. But we now have new properties. We'll have Pinterest, we'll have Twitter, we'll have all that. But they are going to compete with HD.com and Mint.com and the apps. So that whole universe is now in flux, and that's precisely the point. The other thing I just wanted to mention is what we've seen in some of the advertisers is that digital budget is not really coming out of the traditional media budget. It's extra money that is being allocated. So if it was 100 rupees was going to go to radio, TV, and print, 3 years ago, it's not like 95 is now going to them. It's still 100 for radio, TV, print, but there's an extra $5 that's coming for digital.
I think it has been a brilliant discussion, I must say, and obviously each of you have brought about different perspective. But I think it's more about how people today consume news. I mean, it's a mix of information and news. So someone like me, maybe I go to Twitter because it's more interactive. Suppose you put in a news, I could even question you what it is about, and 50 other people would pounce onto it, and then you will come back with one answer. And that one answer makes all the difference to me, because it adds a little more value to what you have already written maybe on a newspaper statement. So it's about interactive consumption of news. If you look at even the happening of, say, the recent happening of Osama being killed, I think the news was on the Twitter much before it was on there. So maybe people who are more used to online and stuff like that, or if I put a Google alert, every day I get all the news that I really want, and I don't want to go through 10 newspapers to find them. So I think it is about consumption of news. About the bottom lines, yes, when digital will really look pink and healthy, we don't know, because, there is no definite revenue model to it, and everyone thinks internet is all about freebies. No one wants to pay for it. But the fear is we should not have another Napster, the musical Napster that we had, where, publishing lost its health to the profitability to what was happening on the internet, though music didn't make a lot of money on the internet as well. So that's my observation, and I would like to have your comment on that.
Although the interesting part is that the savior of the music industry today is the digital world. So the music industry degrew for the last 3 years, but returned to health last year on the backs of digital sales.
Yeah, I mean, that's a different model altogether. If you, because I'm into research, if you look at what has happened with Gangnam Style, it's not that Psy made a lot of money due to the hits on YouTube. He made money because he got a lot more contracts all over the world. So that's a different model altogether. And today, of course, the digital world has its own way of going about it. But how will it impact the print media, or when people really think of getting more
Just a counter
interactive?
question on that. You said you subscribe to 10 Google alerts, 15, whatever. Do you subscribe to any alert for nuclear blast?
No, that's what I said.
You
It's
don't,
good. Yeah.
because
That's
it's not something,
yeah.
but you wouldn't know if it happens next door. It's pretty important for you, but you aren't interested, presumably. And the most important news for you, that there's going to be a nuclear explosion next door, has missed you, and you have not been able to take action. The advantage of the print media or the traditional media is they do this filtering, and they provide the cornucopia of news which the audience needs. There's absolutely need in this world for people to choose, and at the same time to have somebody who knows what to serve. And that's why that difference, I don't think, is ever going to go away. I am not, you are not a news professional. You are a professional in something else. It's not your business to go about choosing news. You choose interests. The people here are news professionals. They choose news. So it's a business. The question is whether this business is interesting or not. So I don't think that debate is a problem. And,
I'm not debating
and
on
so,
that.
so I
I'm
don't think
talking about the consumption of news.
yeah, so that will be there. So as long as it's a news hungry and the economy is bursting, as I said, the people's demand for news, I don't think is going to really dissipate, and it's not going to be a problem there. His issue about the digital revenue not going up, that is a major issue. But I think possibly my hunch is that news is not probably the best medium through which digital will expand. It's not a very friendly medium for, how much news interest would a digital platform build on? For the same reason that your interest will not necessarily be news related, it will be interest related.
News is also there on the Twitter and everything. You get hundreds of news. I think it's just the people you follow to or what you subscribe to.
No. I think sorry, can I just, I think you are pretty much more evolved as a consumption or a consumer of news than, a lot of other people. So the thing is the print industry or the present news industry will get hurt in terms of revenue, etc. once I think more of people like you become more aware how to consume news as such. But having said that, and Subhomoy has a great point there that look, if everybody becomes narrow-minded, sort of has blinkers as to what they want in terms of interest, you start missing out some of the larger news that comes or new areas of interest that start developing. That's a good point, I think.
But very quickly on that, I'm not too pessimistic because I also think that more and more segmented, specialized and niche kind of publishing and journalism is going to start to become the norm now. It's starting to happen in print very much, at least in the magazines area. And it's going to start to happen more and more on the web. You're going to have very specific websites that you want to read. Advertisers will probably go towards that based on what they're selling. And I'm hearing some alarming numbers of, as far as print is concerned, talking from a print point of view. I heard that Samsung is spending 40% of its print advertising revenue on digital these days. And there are more and more companies that are really stepping it up. So, I know, but it's happening, and I think over the next 5 years we're going to see huge changes.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hello. I'd just like to add to her point, and I have a little bit of a contradiction here. Mr. Subhomoy said that if there's a nuclear blast, you wouldn't even know because you're not interested in. But I think you're ignoring the very fact that the whole media is now moving towards sharing and not distribution. Anyways, within a couple of minutes, the news would be shared and she would read it. So distribution is a forced media. By newspaper, I would get the news next morning. Through sharing, I get the next minute. That's how Osama's news came in. I think we all knew that. What would you say about that?
So I think that's where one of the points we were discussing earlier is that news, basically the fact that something has happened, is commodity today because of the immediacy of distribution. However, why it happened, who did it, the analysis behind it, for those who are interested in delving deeper and deeper into a particular piece of news, that is a role that print media today can play and become a significant. So they're complementary in that sense. So a newspaper's website can absolutely carry the news, the fact that something happened, and then the next morning, you read in detail as to why something happened, or like he mentioned, the share buyback, the analysis of it, just justification, all those kind of things. So that's where I believe that the evolution of print media will happen in that sense, because the fact that just plain old commodity news is everywhere. There's no
just one simple example.
Yeah.
You watched T20 at the night. You discuss it with your friends. Next morning, do you find fun in reading the newspaper analyst's comment on how Chris Gale brought in the 175-run express, hurricane? See, that's the point. A newspaper or when he's giving an analyst and when there's a guy who knows how to write and somebody whom you trust, your subscription is your trust, whichever way you subscribe, is built in because those guys are trained in to be able to tell you and me what is most interesting about it. News, as Jehill said, is something happening in front of us, and that's all over. That role has long ago gone away from newspapers. When television came, it was over. Every moment you got whatever was necessary, you could just look around and there is. But what's happening is that you don't get to make a sense of it very quickly unless A, you sit down to the television. Often what happens is next morning, next hour, it may not even stay next morning, it could even be 1 hour later. Somebody puts out an analysis, but you like that guy's reading. You like those guys reading in, and that is why you come in with a person, a contact who can explain, who can bring in the finer points, the interesting points. And that is where the value add comes in, which is why it is not a very, Annurag said it, it's not a very highly, it's not a model where you can bring in large number of people. It's not a very mass model that can be created. It depends on interests.
Yeah. How do we say that print media has a better analysis than television media or the mobile media or the net media?
I'll tell you why. Which is what Jehill asked right at the beginning, which was, it's a question of what is building up. Do you use Facebook to analyze an issue on which you are not the expert on? You don't. You might exchange views. Chances are that you will take a URL and say, just read this up. So what does that mean?
If that was the case, then none of the print media newspapers would have had a Facebook page and updating every minute.
No, we are just simply as copy.
That's a distribution.
That is simply as copy.
That's a distribution. I mean, you're having Facebook to distribute your content even further. And it's not, let me give you today morning example. I do read 5 newspapers. I read the Mint, and of course anything on media, so I read Sevanti's column today in Mint about, media owners and how dubious people are getting into media. And she referred to a conference that happened on Friday, and me and Tripurari were there. And she referred to Subhash Chandra's comment. Now, I read it there, but I went online and then shared it with people. So it's not an either or. Advertisers are there because right now television companies are a very large advertiser on newspapers. Very, very large, Take any newspaper. And a new launch of a television show cannot make an impact, especially in Hindi heartland or, if it's so really, I don't think it's an either or. We know that everything will be digital in 5 years or 3 years or 7, I don't know. But for now, the audiences are on newspapers. Digital has audiences, but maybe it's not being sold well. Maybe it's only an urban phenomena. Maybe there are other reasons why it's not growing. Right now, the reach and frequency and the credibility of an audience, even if it's puffed up IRS numbers or TAM, which is not most accurate, not according to me, it's a statistical tool and it can be better, but it is still a very good barometer. I think advertisers have a currency to measure that. Today there is no currency in digital. I mean, there is Google Analytics, there is a ComScore, Alexa ranking is bullshit, but point is, there's no currency. The day there is currency, I think there will be more money.
Okay. Sorry. Just the last one, please. Yeah.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sanjay Vado, and I have a question for Mr. Thakkar since he was just answered. So are we then saying that digital reading space is limited to a certain kind and weightage of the article or the interview, and print is still more if someone wants to delve deep and for longer articles? Are we still saying that digital is preferred only to get a glimpse or a synopsis or an overview of a news, and is still print something which is better for in-depth, and will it continue?
Is the question addressed?
That's the question.
Yeah. Yeah. So in India, yes, I believe that is the case today. Not necessarily will remain the case going forward. You do have websites that have built a brand of trust, but I think we need to understand that to build that brand of trust where, somebody will keep coming back to you. I think, the gentleman behind you gave the example of Wikipedia versus Encyclopedia Britannica. It does take some time in order for a reader to develop that trust in a particular brand. Now, whether that brand is online, whether that brand is in newspapers, but today newspapers have that brand. Today there's a reason why we get that newspaper in the morning, because we like the way it's curated, we trust the columnists, whatever it is.
Or we want to know what is Congress's viewpoint, what is BJP's viewpoint, what is Trinamool Congress. We know which newspaper is aligned to whom. So you can at least get to know the party's point
so
of
I
view.
think it will develop over time. Now today there are some individual bloggers, there are writers who have developed their own brands online. There are websites that you do that with. If you want product reviews, for example, or film reviews, you may go to a certain writer's or reviewers website, etc. So I think it will come. But as the case today, I think the newspapers hold the key to that.
Because don't you think, keeping aside the politics of digital, I mean, in a sense, digital is reducing cost completely. In a way, 90% of print cost has gone down. But by default, when we are online, by default, everybody has 3 to 4 windows open. So if I'm reading a series or any article from a news group, we have a Gmail, we have a Facebook, we have a Twitter window open. So the moment we get a Gmail or a pop-up, we immediately cut to from the article we are reading to this. While as print will always have its attention dedicated. So that is what I was just trying to ask you.
Yeah, but you still, I don't know if I agree with that, but you still have your phone and your smartphone. You get a new tweet, you might be reading the newspaper, you go and look at the tweet. So, I don't know if that...
I was reading a very interesting piece recently on how Encyclopedia Britannica has shut down its print version completely. And they found that digitally they are making much more money now. So the people are actually subscribing to Britannica, because one of the great advantages is that updates on information get so rapid now. You don't have to wait for the annual update that they used to put out in a separate volume. So it does make money for people at Britannica. They found that people are buying fewer and fewer copies of the print one.
I just want to give you another aside on Encyclopedia Britannica. A friend of mine once advertised in the Express saying he wants to sell his Encyclopedia Britannica. So his, another close friend of ours asked him why. He said, I got married last week, my wife knows everything, I don't need it.
Okay, on that note, thank you everyone for a very engaging session. I'd like to thank all my panelists for some wonderful insight. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you to the panelists, and thank you to the session chair. Ladies and gentlemen, as we move on to this next session, in fact,